The silence inside the shuttle was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional beeping of the mission control panel. Captain Rena Volkov sat at the helm, her knuckles white as she gripped the controls. The weight of the operation pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible force. Her fingers hovered over the comms panel, waiting for the final go-ahead from command. "Rena," a voice crackled through the comms, familiar but cold. "You're green for deployment. Good luck out there." It was Commander Tessa Morrow, the voice of reason in the chaos of battle. But Rena's mind wasn't on her superior officer's words. Her thoughts were with the children, human children, held hostage by the Iksar on their desert planet, Star. The mission was simple: infiltrate, rescue, and retreat. But Rena knew better than anyone that simplicity rarely lasted in war. Her gaze shifted to the screen in front of her, showing a topographical map of Star's heavily fortified military base. The children were being kept in a compound deep underground, isolated from the Iksar forces. And from what the intelligence reports suggested, no one had ever attempted a rescue of this magnitude before. "Everything looks good, Rena," Sergeant Kyle Daniels said, his voice a little too upbeat for the situation. Kyle had been with Rena for years, through hell and back. But today, he wasn't looking at her like he usually did, like a leader. He looked worried. Rena gave him a curt nod, her eyes narrowing as she studied the mission parameters one last time. Her team was the best humanity had to offer: Kyle, an expert in explosives; Rona, a hacker who could break into any system; and Liam, a sniper with unmatched precision. She trusted them all, but today they were facing a force unlike any they'd encountered before. The shuttle lurched as it entered Star's atmosphere, a heavy jolt that shook the hull. Outside, the landscape of endless deserts and jagged rock formations blurred by at breakneck speed. Beneath them, the Iksar stronghold loomed, a sprawling city of glass towers and dark alleyways, surrounded by a vast network of defenses. The shuttle would have to land just outside the city limits. It was too dangerous to get any closer. Rena's jaw tightened. They had no room for mistakes. They couldn't afford a single error. The fate of the children, and humanity, was in their hands. The shuttle touched down with a heavy thud. Rena was the first to move, unbuckling herself and pulling on her helmet. Her team followed suit, one by one. They had trained for this moment, run countless simulations. But now, standing in the dimly lit shuttle bay, the reality of what they were about to do felt like a cold, heavy weight in the pit of her stomach. "All right, team," Rena said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging in her mind. "We move in fast, we move in quiet. Target the compound. We extract the children, no exceptions. If anything goes wrong, we abort and pull out immediately. Understood?" "Understood," Kyle replied, his voice firm. "Roger that," Rona added, adjusting her equipment. Liam remained silent, his eyes scanning the terrain outside the shuttle's small viewport. Rena turned to face her team, her gaze hardening. "This is about more than just a rescue. The Iksar have crossed a line. They're using children, our children, in experiments. We can't let them get away with it. No mercy." There was no response, but that was all the confirmation she needed. Her team was ready. The air was thick with the acrid scent of the desert as Rena led her team toward the base's outer perimeter. The ground beneath them was cracked and dry, the occasional gust of wind kicking up sand. They moved quickly but cautiously, staying low and out of sight from the towering surveillance drones hovering overhead. Rona's voice came over the comms, quiet but urgent. "I'm hacking the security system now. Give me 2 minutes to disable the outer defenses." Rena glanced over her shoulder. "Make it quick. We don't have time to wait around." With Rona at the helm of their digital infiltration, they pressed forward, reaching the walls of the compound in minutes. The perimeter was fortified with thick metal doors and armed sentries. But Rona's expertise made short work of the security systems. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss, and the team slipped inside. The first few corridors were eerily quiet, the hum of machinery the only sound breaking the silence. Rena kept her senses sharp, her mind focused on the task at hand. They moved with precision, each step calculated. There was no room for hesitation, no margin for error. The children were close. "I've pinpointed their location," Rona reported, her voice cutting through the tension. "They're underground, 2 levels down. It's heavily guarded." "Lead the way," Rena replied, her tone firm. They descended into the bowels of the base, each level taking them deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The air grew colder the further they went, and the metallic scent of the underground passages reminded Rena of the countless other missions she had undertaken, each one pushing her further into the depths of war. As they reached the second level, the unmistakable sound of voices reached their ears. A group of Iksar soldiers was stationed near the holding area, their alien voices incomprehensible but filled with authority. Rena gestured for her team to stop. She motioned to Kyle, who nodded and positioned himself behind a column, ready to deploy explosives if needed. Rona began to hack into the base's security cameras, rendering their movements invisible to the guards. Liam, always the quiet one, checked his sniper rifle and scanned the area. His sharp eyes locked onto the guards. 3 of them, he whispered into the comms. "I can take them out silently." Rena considered it for a moment. They were on the clock. The children were too close to waste time. "Take them out," she ordered. "And be quick." The sound of a single, suppressed shot echoed in the hall, followed by 2 more. The guards dropped silently to the floor. "Clear," Liam said. They moved again, their pace faster now as the sounds of the base grew louder. The final door to the children's holding area stood before them. Rena could feel her heart race, but she remained focused. She took a deep breath and turned the handle, stepping into the room. The sight before her took her breath away. There, in stasis pods, lay dozens of children, some human, some genetically altered. Their pale faces were twisted in sleep, their limbs frozen in place. Rena's stomach churned, her fists clenched. This was what the Iksar had done. This was what they were willing to sacrifice for power. She took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "We're getting you out of here." The silence in the holding chamber was oppressive. Rena stood before the rows of stasis pods, her breath steady but her pulse quickening. The children, some no older than 6, were suspended in clear, liquid-filled containers. Their faces were pale and expressionless, eyes closed as if in a peaceful sleep. The horror of what was happening here settled like a weight in Rena's stomach. She had seen suffering before, too much suffering, but this was different. "We have to move fast," Rena whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the chamber's life support systems. "Let's get them out of here." Kyle, already moving to the control panel, began overriding the stasis pod's locks. Rena turned to her team, her gaze sharp. "We're on the clock. Every minute we waste here, the Iksar will be onto us." Rona, her fingers flying over her own device, was busy disabling the security systems once more. The tension in the air was palpable, one mistake and they could be trapped in here forever. Liam, ever the watchful sniper, moved to the door, checking the corridor beyond. His rifle was ready. The faintest scrape of metal on metal echoed from the hallway, and Rena felt her heart leap into her throat. "Someone's coming," Liam muttered, his voice tense. 3 guards, approaching fast. Rena's mind raced. There was no time to waste. "Kyle, can you hurry that up?" she demanded, her voice firm. Kyle didn't look up from the panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's tricky. The Iksar use biometric security here. Give me 30 seconds." The seconds stretched, each one feeling like an eternity. The distant clatter of footsteps grew louder, closer. Rena could almost hear their heavy, reptilian footsteps now. She held her breath, signaling to her team to be still. They needed to get the children out of their pods before the guards arrived, or it would be all over. The pod doors hissed open, one by one. Rena's heart lifted with every child she saw waking, their eyes blinking as they adjusted to the sudden release from their artificial slumber. The youngest, no older than 5, let out a soft cry as the liquid drained from her pod. Rena moved to her, carefully lifting her out and cradling her in her arms. "Shoo, It's okay, Rena murmured, her voice calming, even though her own nerves were on edge. You're safe now. Behind her, Kyle cursed softly. I've unlocked half of them, but the system is fighting me. Another minute. The sound of heavy boots echoed just outside the door. Rena's eyes flicked to Liam, who was poised in a corner, rifle raised, waiting for the guards to come into view. They'll be here any second, Liam warned. How many? Rena asked, her voice low, steady. 3, Liam repeated. I've got the first one. You deal with the other 2. Rena nodded, her pulse quickening. The children were almost free. But the Iksar guards were close. Time was running out. Go, she said to Kyle, her voice demanding. Kyle quickly worked faster, his hands moving in a blur. The pods continued to open one by one, each child freed. Rena counted them off in her head, 8, 9, 10. So many more to go. The door to the hallway suddenly slid open, and 3 Iksar guards entered, their sharp, reptilian eyes scanning the room. They froze when they saw Rena and her team, their weapons drawn in an instant. Intruders, one of them hissed, raising his gun. The firefight was instantaneous. Liam fired first, his sniper shot clean and precise, striking one of the guards in the neck. The alien fell with a gurgling scream, collapsing to the ground. Kyle ducked behind the control panel, firing a plasma rifle at the second guard, who staggered but didn't fall. The shot had only grazed his shoulder. Rena's own weapon was already in her hands, a sleek energy pistol she had used countless times in combat. She fired once, twice, both shots finding their mark. The second guard dropped to the floor, his body twitching as his energy shield fizzled out. But the third guard wasn't so easy. He raised his weapon, aiming for Kyle, who was still crouched behind the panel. No! Rena shouted, stepping forward just as the Iksar fired. She dove to the side, narrowly missing the blast, and returned fire in one smooth motion. Her shot hit the guard square in the chest, and he fell backward, lifeless. Silence descended again, but the danger was far from over. That's the last of them, Liam reported, his rifle still trained on the corridor. Kyle exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his brow. That was too close. We're not done yet, Rena said, her eyes locked on the remaining children in their pods. Keep moving. We still have more to free. Rona, who had been quietly working at a nearby terminal, finally stood up. I've disabled the last of the locks. They're all free. Rena nodded, turning to the children. She was already cradling the youngest in her arms, but there were still so many to carry. Liam, help me with the others. Kyle, stay on the comms and keep us updated. Rona, we need an escape route. Now. The team sprang into action, moving quickly but cautiously. Each child was freed and carefully ushered out of the holding chamber, but Rena couldn't shake the sense of urgency gnawing at her. They were getting close, too close, to being caught. Outside, the sound of distant footsteps echoed again, louder this time. They couldn't keep running forever. They had to make it to the extraction point. Rena, Kyle called out, his voice tight with concern. We've got a problem. The Iksar know we're here. There's a full battalion moving in our direction. We won't make it to the shuttle in time. Rena's heart sank. A battalion? That was too much. Then we'll make our stand here, she said, her voice steady. No one gets left behind. As she turned back to the children, ensuring each was safely accounted for, Rena's thoughts were clear. They had started this mission to save these children, but now it was about to turn into a fight for their lives. The Iksar were coming, and they were coming in force. The walls of the underground compound seemed to close in around Rena as the alarms blared louder. She had been on countless missions, but nothing compared to this. The Iksar were coming, and they were coming fast. A battalion, just as Kyle had reported. The odds were against them, but there was no turning back now. Rena, we've got no time, Kyle's voice crackled through her earpiece. The exit's compromised. They've locked down the shuttle landing zone. Rena didn't flinch. She'd known this might happen. "We hold our ground," she said, her voice steady. "We're not leaving until every child is safe." She turned to her team, who were already in defensive positions. The children, exhausted and frightened, were huddled in the corner of the room, too scared to move. Rena had promised them safety, and she intended to deliver, no matter the cost. Liam, crouched by the door with his rifle in hand, was scanning the hallway through the small viewport. "I've got eyes on them," he whispered. "At least 30 soldiers, maybe more. They're moving fast. We've got less than 5 minutes before they breach this level." 5 minutes, Rena repeated to herself, trying to steady the rising panic in her chest. "We'll need less." She turned to Rona, who was hunched over a terminal, fingers dancing across the keypad. "Rona, any chance you can get us a way out?" Rona didn't look up, but the lines of concentration deepened on her face. "I can scramble the systems temporarily, create a diversion," she muttered. "But the exit will only stay open for a minute or two. You've got to be ready." "Ready," Rena affirmed, her voice colder than she felt inside. She glanced back at the children, her heart aching for them. She couldn't fail them now. Kyle tapped her on the shoulder. "We need a plan, Rena. This isn't a small skirmish. We can't fight an entire battalion head-on and survive." "I know," Rena said, her mind already working. "We don't have the luxury of a straight-up fight. We hit them hard, fast, and make them chase us." Rena turned to Liam. "How many exits are there? Any other way out of here?" "One," Liam said, his tone clipped. "But it's locked down tighter than a vault. If Rona can do what she says, it'll only be a temporary gap." "Good enough," Rena replied. "Get to the exit point, set up a trap. Kyle, I want you on comms. Keep us informed. We're hitting them fast, and we're not waiting around." Rona gave a small nod, her fingers still working furiously on the console. "You're all crazy, you know that?" "No time for second thoughts," Kyle said, his tone grim. "Let's move." The team shifted into motion. Liam moved quickly, slipping out into the hallway, disappearing into the shadows as he made his way to the exit point. Rona stayed behind to monitor the systems, her eyes never leaving the terminal. Kyle stood close to Rena, his weapon at the ready. 5 minutes, Rena repeated, glancing at the timer ticking down on the comm screen. The countdown was slow, deliberate. Time had never felt so fragile. The sound of distant footsteps began to echo down the hallways, the Iksar soldiers closing in. The pounding of Rena's heart matched the rhythm of the approaching threat. The children huddled closer together, sensing the danger, their small bodies trembling in fear. "We need to move," Rena said, her voice firm but gentle. She crouched down next to one of the children, offering a soft smile. "I promise, you're going to be all right. We're almost there." As the seconds ticked away, Rena's thoughts flashed back to her own childhood, when everything was simple, when she never imagined she would be caught in a war like this, fighting to protect the future. She couldn't fail them. Not now. The doors at the end of the hallway burst open, and Iksar soldiers flooded into the room, their weapons drawn, their sharp eyes scanning for targets. Rena's pulse quickened. "Now, Rona," she yelled. The terminal's screen blinked rapidly as Rona's fingers hit the final key. The entire system seemed to glitch, then buzz as the door to the main exit popped open with a violent hiss. "Go, go, go!" Rena shouted, and without hesitation, she sprinted toward the door, her team following closely behind. The children, some still stunned and confused, began to move, urged forward by Rena's determined voice. The team split into 2 groups. Liam led the children through the newly opened door while Rena and Kyle held the rear, covering their retreat. The hallways blurred as they ran, the noise of their footsteps mingling with the growing clamor of the Iksar soldiers behind them. Rena's mind was focused only on one thing, the safety of the children. There was no room for fear now. Behind them, the sound of gunfire erupted. Kyle opened fire, his plasma rifle sending a burst of light into the corridor, temporarily blinding their pursuers. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice laced with urgency. Rena barely registered the shots fired by the Iksar soldiers as she continued forward, her eyes fixed on the door ahead. She could hear the panicked breaths of the children, the shuffling of their tiny feet, and the pounding of the enemy growing louder. Almost there, Rena muttered to herself, trying to block out the noise. The exit was only a few hundred feet away, but with each step, the sounds of the battle grew nearer. They reached the exit point. Liam was already waiting by the shuttle, his weapon aimed toward the approaching soldiers. "Hurry!" he yelled. Rena pushed the last of the children toward him, watching as they scrambled into the shuttle. Her heart was pounding, and her legs felt like lead, but she didn't stop. Not until the last child was safely aboard. The Iksar soldiers were closing in. There was no time to hesitate. "Go, now!" Rena shouted to Liam, her voice frantic. Liam hit the shuttle's controls, and the engines roared to life. The door began to close, but just as it was about to shut, Rena felt a sharp pain in her side. She stumbled forward, the world spinning as she tried to keep her balance. Kyle was already by her side, his arm around her waist, pulling her toward the shuttle. "Rena, move," he barked. With one last push, they both made it inside, just as the doors slammed shut. The shuttle lurched upward, the force of the escape throwing them all into their seats. Rena gasped for air, her side throbbing with pain, but she forced herself to look out the window. The compound was rapidly shrinking in the distance, the soldiers now far behind. "We made it," Kyle said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We did it." Rena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, the stars stretching out before them. The children were safe, just for now. But Rena knew one thing, the Iksar wouldn't give up that easily. This fight was far from over.